everybody, and welcome to another Top 5 Records video. Today I'm going to be talking about one of the most impressive and important artists within the world of jazz, John Coltrane. Not only did he change his own sound and his own career, several times he changed the course of jazz history. And this man has such an impressive career. But before I'm going to start talking about his 5 best records as a band leader, I'd like to point out that this man worked on and can be heard on 2 of my all-time favorite albums, regardless of genre. And the first one I'm going to talk about, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about which pressings did it to me, because especially within the world of jazz, but actually any record, the experience comes so close to how these things are mastered and printed, how it sounds, what is the nuance in the sound, does the record draw you in, how close does it sound, how much definition do you hear, where can you hear the instruments, what's the reverb. I mean, sound is everything, and music is emotion, and a good pressing can bring you that. But to get back to the records on which he can be heard, which are 2 of my all-time favorites, and I had to point this out just to show you how great of an artist he is. John Coltrane worked on Le Grand Jazz. Le Grand Jazz is a masterpiece album by Michel Legrand, and he wanted to work with the best names in jazz. It's 1958, and not only can John Coltrane be heard, Miles Davis is on here, Art Farmer, Donald Byrd, Hank Jones, Paul Chambers, Bill Evans. There are so many great Herbie Mann. This is one of the great jazz albums. This is a mono first US, sounds amazing. But even more impressive is the recent 45 RPM by Impex Records. It's still in print. It's beautiful. Buy it. It's one of the most stellar sounding records you can find. And the other record, and everybody already knows which I'm gonna put up, with John Coltrane, I love this one. It's Miles Davis' Kind of Blue. Also, I mean, a classic, a brilliant record, and it has been repressed recently in one of the most amazing sounding represses of all time, namely the UHQR on Super Vinyl. And this is a brilliant version of the stereo, and this is the first US mono. I tend to put on the US mono more often, but the nuance and the stereo image of this one is also brilliant. I cannot choose. These kind of records, I mean, they really come to life in a good pressing, and it's an intense experience if you can find the right pressing. Now, on to the list, the top 5 of best John Coltrane records as a band leader. Number 5, Giant Steps. Giant Steps is quite something. This is the first album he made with solely his own compositions, which does something uniquely to what we're hearing, because before this he worked mostly on a lot of his works were covers and traditionals, which is interesting, of course. But here we can hear someone who's really challenging the way jazz sounds. There were people when he toured Europe who critics wrote that this was the suicide of jazz. He toured with Eric Dolphy, and they said these guys were making anti-jazz. Oh, it's not anti-jazz. It's just impressive and another step beyond. This sound goes all over the place. It's quite an experience. I really love it. The number 5 spot on the list, Giant Steps. The number 4, and you might not expect this in here, because lots of John Coltrane fans go for his more challenging works, the more experimental phases. But when I first heard this one, Soultrane, it just blew me away. I was in the center of Amsterdam. I was at a record store. I went downstairs in the record store, record friend, and the store owner was playing the most beautiful, smooth sounding jazz. I heard the saxophone who just took over the entire place, and I wasn't accustomed to listening to John Coltrane. I did I thought he was a bit too experimental for my taste in the early days when I started with listening to jazz. So I thought John Coltrane is not for me. And then the record store owner asked me, "Can you hear any ticks and plops?" And I said, "No, this sounds brilliant." He says, "Yeah, the record has scratches, but I just found first US mono pressing of Soultrane." And I just stood there nailed to the ground. It was completely impressive. I could not afford that record. I could not afford it because it was priced, I believe, 200 euros. And it's, I mean, that record is worth that. But I found mono pressing of Analog Productions, which sounds, it has the same amount of romance to it. I never could be able to compare the two of them on my system, but this is an amazing sounding record. It's just pure romance. Pure romance. I really love this record. It sounds great. It has Paul Chambers on bass. Bass. In the Netherlands we say bass, but Paul Chambers on bass. It's awesome, and thank you Analog Productions for this beautiful mono repressing. You know. The number 3 spot. Also an Analog Productions pressing, but in their acoustic sounds series, namely Ballads. And Ballads is quite something. I believe it's even a bit more challenging than Soultrane, but it never becomes too free jazz or avant-garde. And I love free jazz and avant-garde. I wouldn't even call this free jazz or avant-garde. How would you guys describe it? It's a brilliant record. It's lovely. It has romance to it. It has atmosphere to it. It is a very intimate record. It sounds stellar on this acoustic sounds pressing. It really came to life on this one. And it is a gorgeous intimate record. I believe it's still for sale because this series started about a year ago, and this is one of their centerpieces in my regard. It's a masterpiece. Now, on number 2, a record which I did not like at first. Blue Train. And as a matter of fact, I got Blue Train as the first jazz record I ever got. And it was at the 75 Blue Note pressing, and it just never seemed to work for me. I just never seemed to get really into it. And then I found this 70s reissue of it, which is analog. I believe the repress, I'm not sure, might have been digital. I don't know what, but it just felt, I felt distant. It felt sterile. And this sounds full, refreshing, energetic. And the entire record has a certain element, just like the cover art. Dark, blue, challenging, focused. This is John Coltrane on a Blue Note record. And some people say it might be the best Blue Note record ever. They might be right, but you could also say something else, or literally something else, but cannibally, or another Blue Note album. It's definitely one of the best jazz albums of all time and one of the best Blue Note albums of all time. I mean, this has Lee Morgan on trumpet. This has Paul Chambers on bass. It's so amazing, and I really grew into it because I found the right pressing. And the same can actually be somewhat said to the number 1 spot. And I think most John Coltrane fans already know what's coming up. So, no surprise, A Love Supreme. Oh my God, this is brilliant. John Coltrane got into his more spiritual phase with this record. I believe the record also tries to describe certain stages of can it even be something as meditation? I'm not a very spiritual person, so I'm not really into those kind of things. What I just hear is brilliant, beautiful sound. And there's also some vocals on there. It's a very simple focus. It's a love supreme, a love supreme. It feels like he's really building somewhere. But when this record starts, when a needle hits this and you hear those first sounds, it's like diving into another world, diving into another dimension of music, of jazz. John Coltrane is on top of his game, and it's a challenging, beautiful record, but it draws you in immediately. What I'm holding here is the acoustic sound series pressing by Analog Productions again, and it is, I also had a different pressing before that, which sounded okay. I mean, this record works all the time, but when you listen to it on this pressing, oh, you go to other places. It's transcendental. It's awesome. It's amazing. If you have not listened to A Love Supreme, do yourselves a favor. Buy this record and start enjoying what John Coltrane did to music. With music, to music. It's just amazing. Well, that is my top 5 list of best John Coltrane records. Please leave a comment below if you agree or disagree, or have some records which I might not even have heard of his. It's always good to keep listening to more and more music. And see you in another video. Bye.